Right. The amount of historiography required is less in comparison to modern India. Here we require more debates as well as opinions of various historians, but that requires subsidies in world history. But फिर भी कुछ क्वेश्चन आ जाते हैं, ठीक है ना. That's why we are covering around 10 to 12 important debates. Here our major focus would be on debates first, then international organizations, because at times UPSC can give you even a 50 marker all right from organization itself. This happened in 2015. 50 नंबर का पूरा क्वेश्चन सिर्फ क्लब करके इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का दे दिया. तो दैट मीन्स अगर आता है अच्छे से इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन तो 50 मार्क्स एक जगह से मिल गया. Okay, that's the second thing. Third very important thing would be, we'll be covering some topics which are not normally found in books, like Australia, Latin America. All such topics will cover in the class itself. Okay, there are many such topics. Plus, I'm also going to give you a brief recap of overall world history. That we'll do in the third class. The overall world history को connect कैसे करना है each and every topic, because here it's mostly political history. Right, सिर्फ political history पढ़ रहे हैं ना हम इसमें. It means every event is connected with the other. Alright, and once the timeline is clear, you can easily write 2 to 3 points extra than other students. That's why this brief recap we'll do in the third class. First class today will dedicate to debates. Second will cover international organization. Third, brief recap and then the beginning of the topics. And fourth, we'll try to cover as many topics as possible. Alright, so let us start with the first topic. The first topic that we have is debate with respect to American Revolution. There are two specific debates. One is with respect to, was it a revolution or evolution? Okay, this is the first debate. Second debate we have is with respect to the various viewpoints, the various observations by historians that we need to understand. There is one more aspect on which UPSC asks question: was it a conflict between American capitalism versus British mercantilism? This is not given in the handouts, but we'll still discuss this one also. Okay, so these are the three perspectives you need to understand with respect to American Revolution. All right, चलो एक बार जल्दी से पढ़ो इसको. First two debates. Third belongs to American Civil War, उसको भी मत पढ़ना. Read the first two. Can you tell me the factors which were responsible for American Revolution? जल्दी बताओ. Okay, one was 7-year war from 1756 to 63. All right. After this war, we see there was change in the leadership, and Canada came under the control of British. So since France was defeated, USA no longer had to depend upon Britain from external security. ठीक है ना? That is the one reason. Then what else? Tell me the beginning. मतलब factors क्या है ना, बहुत सारे dimensions के होते हैं, ठीक है ना? T वाला जो policy, that was the last confrontation, which eventually led to the outburst of the revolution. But there are many factors. What were the factors? लिखोगे क्या क्वेश्चन में? ऐसे लिख पाओगे जैसे बोल रहे हो? क्या देखेंगे? ठीक है. वन वाज द मर्केंटलिस्ट पॉलिसीज. कैन यू गिव एनी एग्जांपल? Navigation Act was there, Currency Act was there, okay. Sugar Act, large number of acts were passed by them. Navigation Act was in place from 1650s, okay, but it was implemented voraciously by British during this period, by the middle of the 18th century, okay. So from 1750s onwards, there was a marked difference in the policies of British. All right, give me more answers. There were certain leaders which came during this period time. UPSC can ask two types of questions. One, what were the factors responsible for American Revolution? वहाँ पे तो जो मन में आए लिखते जाना. Second, they asked in 2014 that a roster of leaders rose, which eventually led to American Revolution. So it means there were certain leaders which were responsible for the American Revolution. Tell me the name of those leaders. Okay, we had Benjamin Franklin. What was his role? He was a philosopher. आगे James Otis है. So James Franklin, he visited Britain. He filed petitions in British Parliament, okay, over the various measures which was taken by the British. Then we have James Otis, and James Otis gave the famous slogan of no taxation without representation. Then we had Samuel Adams. What was the role of Samuel Adams? He led the Boston Tea Party. That was the role of Samuel Adams. Then we also had Thomas Paine. अब नाम याद आ रहे हैं? लाइन से आते हैं एकदम से ना. Thomas Paine. He wrote Common Sense. Okay. The kind of policies which were pursued by British, he said it is commonsensical for Americans to separate from Britain. All right, we should make our own countries. That's why he wrote Common Sense. Tell me more names. We have Thomas Jefferson. Very good. बस नाम बताना पड़ता. थॉमस में अपने आप आता जेफरसन. थॉमस जेफरसन. What was his role? He drafted. Initial जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के लिए था वो उसको ड्राफ्ट किया इन्होंने. Okay. Then we had George Washington. He was the leader, military commander. Okay, so there were various leaders who were guiding the American Revolution. This can be one particular question. Okay, इसको याद कर लेना, because if PYQ repeat होता है, so this easily you can write 7-8 points. All right. Then factor responsible में one was the 7-year war, which eventually led to the feeling some among Americans अब हमें security की जरूरत नहीं है, because France has gone. All right. And second, the mercantilist policies of Britain. All right. But, and along with this, during the later part from 1773 onwards till 1776, those 3 years are very important. During those 3 years, we see Lord North, he came up with tea policy. What was the tea policy? Americans cannot buy tea except from East India Company. India से लेके जा रहे थे और वहाँ पे बेच रहे थे. This was the reality. Okay, they had a large number of tea bags. अब उसको कहाँ बेचना है? That's why Lord North, he came up with tea policy, which was not liked by the Americans. Okay, afterwards, they were what happened? Since where this incident happened? This happened in Boston. Okay, after that, specifically the Boston port was closed, and even the local self-governance of the Boston area, it was taken away. Massachusetts Assembly was blocked. Then we see the coming of the army from Britain and eventually beginning of the American Revolution. Okay, there was first Continental Congress also in 1775, which decided to come up with or give chance to the British to reform their policies. But when they did not do so by 1776, they started revolution. So this is the linkage. Okay, we are discussing it so that अगर आंसर आता कम से कम एक टॉपिक तो यहीं पर रिवाइज हो जाएगा. Role of the leaders, you can write down. We have 5-6 leaders. कोई भी क्वेश्चन आए, one of the factors is going to be role of the leaders, because without such leaders, these people could not have won. Okay, and because of this also, we have one specific opinion that it was the bourgeois class which was fighting for its interest rather than the Americans. Because these people, majority of these people, these were landlords, जिनके पास अच्छी खासी प्रॉपर्टी थी. So these people were fighting for their property rather than for themselves, कि हम कुछ American nationality बनी थी. Alright, this is part of the debate. Now just see the debate quickly and then we can start discussing that. If we talk about impact, तो impact में क्या रहेगा? What was the impact of American Revolution? कभी भी किसी revolution का impact आता तो what can be the broad structure? Because at least 1 to 2 questions will be there where they will be asking the impact of the revolution. किसी न किसी revolution का तो पूछेंगे. So what kind of structure can be created? So you need to check out, is the impact related to decolonization? Okay. What were the important ideals? Do we see any innovation in the field of constitution? Okay. Impact on the specific country itself, like American Revolution impact on America, on their own country. Then their impact on the world. So just certain points which you can remember whenever any question is asked. Like if you see here, this was the first revolution which led to the beginning of decolonization. Okay, that's why even in decolonization topic you can write about American Revolution, how the beginning of the decolonization starts from American Revolution. Second, what were the ideals? Liberty was there. Fraternity तो फिर वहां पे चले जाते हैं हम फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन में. इक्वालिटी, लिबर्टी, ये सब यहाँ का भी था. ठीक है, इट्स नॉट लाइक सिर्फ फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन वाज फाइटिंग फॉर दैट. और यहाँ पे एक और फेमस आया था, दैट वाज द परस्यूट ऑफ हैप्पीनेस. Okay, what were the important ideals of the revolution for which they were fighting? You need to mention. Then it led to the first constitution in the world history, and this was promulgated in which year? 1789. America is known as New World. Okay, because it was a new civilization, right? Christopher Columbus, he went 1492. Afterwards, we see the beginning of settling in Americas. Before that, only Indians or the original people were living and their population was very less. So that's why it is known as New World. So it was a question आता है that in 1789, all right, New World went towards creating constitution and a new structure of society, while the old world relapsed into violence for next 25 years. What is old world related to? Europe. In 1789, we also see the beginning of French Revolution. So from 1789 till 1815, Battle of Waterloo, for 25 years, Europe was fighting among themselves, while on the other side we see beginnings of a new kind of modern society in America. Okay, so you need to understand the concept of new world versus old world, because question में direct आएगा and you need to decipher it on your own. Okay, again, what was the impact on America itself? क्या क्या changes हुआ? What were the changes? Creation of federation for the first time, ठीक है, written constitution बनाया इन्होंने, ठीक है, new structure, new ideals, democratic institutions, they got recognition in the constitution. A different capitalist way of living, that was recognized in the constitution. In American constitution, capitalism is accepted. Okay, capitalism is the most, जैसे हमारे में क्या socialistic बाद में add किया गया है after emergency, but these people have included capitalism as a way of life from the beginning itself. Alright, so this is the specific impact on the Americas. Then we see what was the worldwide impact. Its impact on French Revolution. Because of this, French, they became bankrupt, right? And some of the leaders like Lafayette, etc., these were training the Americans during the revolution, and when they went back in France, these people led the initial stages of French Revolution. Second, after this revolution, we see the large number of revolution within Latin America also. Latin America also, right? Because of the influence of American Revolution. So within next 50 years, maximum countries of Latin America, they became independent. Okay, so all these things you can write down. All right, whichever impact, चाहे French Revolution आ जाए, चाहे कोई भी important revolution है, you need to understand its local impact, ideals, is it related to constitution, decolonization or impact on the world. Okay, do think along these lines, otherwise क्या होगा, 2-3 पॉइंट लिख के बैठ जाओगे शांति से, and that is not something which is the ideal situation. If it is a 20 marker question, you have to generate at least 10-15 points. That's the basic necessity. So these can be your subheadings. Okay, let us see the debate. So American Revolution, there are different views on causes and motivation of American Revolution. First we see the Whigs. Whigs is a party from England. All right, Whigs and Tories, these are the two important parties. So this is the Whigs opinion. So we have George Bancroft, he is one of the leaders, and he was active in the 19th century. He said, not from accidental impulse. So it was not just an impulse which led to American Revolution, but from the steady advancement of mankind towards modernity, in this case represented by America transcending from servitude to Britain to a higher form of democracy. This is also one of the questions which has come in UPSC previously. Are you able to see the previous year questions? उन पर brainstorming कर लो. That is a very good requirement, brainstorming. Now the question was, American Revolution was a natural and expected event from a very matured society. What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of mature society? Do we see India as a mature society or Sri Lanka? प्रेसिडेंट हाउस चलना है, हमारे यहाँ टिकट लगती है वहां पे, चलो चलते हैं आज स्विमिंग पूल हम जाते हैं कहाँ पे, हाँ, वी गो टू जिम एक्सेट्रा, है वहां लोग कहते हैं चलो प्रेसिडेंट हाउस. Anyway, the meaning of mature society is very simple. Political, social and economic institutions are well developed. All right, and such a society cannot be maintained under colonial rule for long time. That is the more important thing. Like if we talk about India, so India was colonized from 1757 till around 1858. This was the expansionist phase of British, and even after that they stayed till 1947. So for around 200 years largely they controlled us. They looted us, they plundered us. But this was not the situation in USA. What was difference in the USA? People of USA, they were giving less taxes than Britain. Suppose if you are residing in USA, तो आपका tax suppose $10 है. If you go to Britain, वो 15 pound के आसपास है. Right? So they were paying less taxes. Okay. these people were having their own self governance institutions. There were 13 colonies. There were 13 colonies, right, on the eastern part of USA, and all of them they were having self governance. इंडिया में सेल्फ गवर्नेंस कब आया? ये भी नहीं पता, यूएसए की बातें कर रहा हूं. यस, दिस इज सिविल सर्विसेज एग्जाम. 37 47 में आया था कि नहीं आया था? देखो डायरेक्ट पार्टिसिपेशन अपना 1919 से रहा, ठीक है, तो वहां से उन्होंने सेल्फ गवर्नेंस और डोमिनियन रूल्स को थोड़ा सा एक्सेप्ट कर लिया था. बट एनीवे दीज पीपल वर हैविंग सेल्फ गवर्नेंस फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग इटसेल्फ. इट मींस the things for which we started fighting during the 20th century, these people were having it from the end of the 17th century itself. Okay, such a mature society is not going to stay under the control of any colonial rule, and that was the situation also till 1750, from the beginning of 1607. In 1607 they established the first colony. Majority of these people, they were political prisoners and they went on exile, okay, to America. ऐसे लोगों को भेजते थे ना यहाँ पे, like we had अंडमान एंड निकोबार. आजकल तो टूरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन है, but previously it used to be a central prison. अभी भी है ना वहाँ पे, it used to be a prison. So just like that, British people, they used to send people to America, Australia. चलो यहाँ से निकलो, okay, that was the something. So that's why these people were paying less taxes and still they were having self governance. It was not a form of colonialism which was in India. India में क्या था? It was more of loot and plunder, but there they were settlers colony. They went there and they created their own institution as well as societal wealth. Okay, because of these reasons these people were very mature politically also, social also, and economic also. They were industry in America. These people were free enterprise oriented. That's why when from 1750 onwards policies were changed by British, these people started revolting, and they already had leaders. लाइक इंडिया में लीडरशिप का एवोल्यूशन देखोगे, पहले आराम से शांति से रिलीजियस रिफॉर्म के लीडर्स आ रहे हैं, फिर हमारा मॉडरेट फेज है, फिर हमारा एक्सट्रीमिस्ट फेज है, फिर हमारा गांधीयन फेज आता है, धीरे धीरे करके आता है. सी दीज पीपल, सैमुअल एडम्स ने आते ही सीधा शुरू कर दिया. ऑलराइट, सैमुअल एडम्स, हर कोई रेडी था, मिलिट्री कमांडर भी था इनके पास में, रेवोल्यूशनरी भी था, एवरीबडी वाज देयर, फिलोसफर वर आल्सो देयर, एवरीबडी वाज देयर इन 1776 कि सब कुछ तैयार बैठा है. तो such leaders cannot be, they not come in a vacuum. All right, are you able to understand? Only when a society is mature we can have such a roster of leaders. All right, हमारे जो मैक्सिमम लीडर्स हैं वो कौन से पीरियड में है? 20th century. 20th century में हर कोई फेमस हुआ, all of them they got matured. These people were matured from the beginning itself. It means this society was very good from the beginning itself. And such a society cannot be kept under colonial rule. That's why you can remember this statement that American Revolution, it was an expected event. Okay, it was an expected event, and there you have to write all these points. All right, the society was politically, economically as well as socially, they were advanced. Because of this, they could not stay under the colonial rule for time. The initial phase from 1607 till 1750, it was a very liberal phase. Okay, it was a very liberal phase in which there was a kind of symbiotic relationship. They required British to make sure कि France आके उनको conquer ना करे. Alright, they required it for safety. They required it also for trading purpose. कितना दूर दूर तक जा रही है हमारी मिलिट्री, हमारे साथ में रहे. But eventually when these people were at the height of their power and British started changing the policies, they revolted. भाई ऐसा चलेगा ही नहीं, ठीक है. So within 25 years, 1750 we see reverse in the colonial policies, and by 1776 these people became independent. Are you able to understand? ठीक है, this is the most important part. This is the viewpoint given by Whigs. See the second one. Second we have the progressives. All right, so they say it was fostered by economic depression and bungling economic policies of Great Britain. So it is the viewpoint which we were discussing, that it was a conflict between British mercantilism versus American capitalism. So you need to remember the various acts, ठीक है, शुगर एक्ट हो गया, करेंसी एक्ट हो गया, नेविगेशन एक्ट हो गया, टी पॉलिसी हो गया, all of these are nothing but mercantilist policies. What is the meaning of mercantilism? Using the political power for economic gains. Okay, this is what mercantilism is. So they were using the political power they were having in USA specifically for their own economic gains. And on the other side we see the capitalist. What is the meaning of capitalist? Free enterprise. They require the role of market forces, which was not allowed by British. Alright, so they had certain policies. They were not allowing the development of iron industry in USA. They were not allowing the free trade, okay, because जैसे कि हमने टी के केस में देखा, they were also imposing the tax on sugar, they were also imposing tax on currency. So in a way they were trying to extract maximum profit from USA. These mercantilist policies, they were not accepted by the Americans who were fully mature. That's why they came up with the idea by James Otis, no taxation without representation. It means these people were not having any representation in British House of Commons. That's why they said अगर वहाँ पे representation दोगे तो ही tax लगाने देंगे. So that was the initial kind of slogan and it became very famous. जैसे इंडिया में क्या था, Quit India, वहाँ पे ये था, no taxation without representation. So this is the importance of the slogans. Next we see neo-Whigs, okay, and they emphasize on American Revolution as humanity's natural tendency to evolve politically towards better social and political institutions, in this case moving from restrictive monarchy to and oligarchy to a republic. So just remember this viewpoint, okay. All the questions which UPSC is asking, they are from one or the other school of historiography. Like we have seen 3 specific viewpoints and all of them they are a form of question. Okay, so remember, कम से कम introduction में लिख पाओगे, at the above historical perspective is given by this school and your answer will become different from others. Okay, next we see the 4th viewpoint, that is left movements. So these people they support British itself. Okay, so they have just represented American colonies as the villains and British government as the heroes. All right, so overall if we see, so these are different opinions we have, okay, and they are able to sum up the causes of American Revolution. These are the various viewpoints and you need to remember them. If you see the next one, was American Revolution really a revolution? Now this is another debate. What happens at times, the word revolution is used in the beginning, it becomes a cult, and technically it may not be correct. What is the meaning of revolution? Sudden, large scale changes, and these changes should be of fundamental character, means once they are done they should not be reversed. This is the meaning of revolution. And when we talk about evolution, like if we talk about Bolshevik Revolution, so yes, it was a revolution because in one day itself we see the coming of Bolshevik as the majority government. But this was not the case in America. Revolution can only be seen from the impact of a particular event, political, economic, social, cultural. But here we are saying politically these people were having self-governance even before the revolution itself. Okay, economically we can see these people were having a capitalistic form of production and that continued. Socially also there was no abolishment of slavery, etc. So if we see the various characteristics of America, they continued as it is. The only addition was a governance structure was reformed with the beginning of a constitution plus creation of USA. If we see 13 colonies, there was no revolutionary change. There was no revolutionary change as such. That's why it is better to use the word evolution. Like same debate you can even have in the ancient India with respect to Neolithic revolution. What is the time period of Neolithic period? 8000 BC to 1000 BC, 7000 years. अब 7000 years में क्या revolution होगा? It should be sudden and with large scale changes. But once the word is used by someone, because it is a kind of romantic to use the word revolution, है ना, हर किसी को अच्छा लगता है ना सुनने में, हाँ revolution है ये तो एक, that becomes a cult. Once you use the word, फिर वो वहीं पे stick हो जाता है. Like French Revolution, yes, the amount of changes we have, it was a revolution, but America, not so much. Okay, so it was more of a evolution rather than a revolution, if that kind of debate comes. So there also you have to explain the same things which we have discussed here, ki it was even expected from these people. These people were matured in political, social and economic institutions. That's why it cannot be considered as a revolution. It was more for the status quo. These people were fighting for something which has already been done. All right, सारी चीजें प्रोग्रेस हो चुकी थी, बस उनके हाथ में फाइनल कमांड रहनी थी, and that was something which they took by American War of Independence. So it was more of a war of independence rather than a revolution. Okay, remember these phrases which I am telling you, because कौन सा क्वेश्चन किस तरीके से आएगा we do not know, and I am just giving you the various perspective along with the reasoning. That is what is required. Just read it. A truly revolutionary event or not a revolution. Just read quickly. So if you see the arguments in favor of revolutionary event, see the arguments: transformation of society, democratic ideals, and third, it paved the way for the overall changes in the long run, not in the short term. Long run में क्या था? Abolition of slavery, women rights movement, as well as broadening of democracy. Okay, USA is considered as a symbol of democracy. Then we see not a revolution, because it was a conservative event and did not change the structure of American society. Rather, it reinforced the political, economic and social status quo. Okay, did not have the social condition generally believed to be cause of all revolution. All right, the colonists, they were not an oppressed people. They knew they were freer, more equal, more prosperous than any other people of their time. Need to remember this point. Okay, if we see after the revolution also, there was no equality among for black people as well as women. All right, People who were in power, they remained in power afterwards. Most land remained in the hand of wealthy. Did not abolish slavery, right? And it was not also a truly democratic government. Social consequences, they were less if we compare it with France and Russian Revolution. Even if we see the economic structure, so it was more of capitalism rather than any specific change. Like if we see Bolshevik Revolution, there was change from capitalism to communism. Okay, similarly if we see in France, so people before that they were having privileges, afterward there were no privileges. So it was a social upheaval कि भाई चेंज कर दिया, इक्वालिटी की तरफ जा रहे. There was no such thing in American Revolution. These people were just more of fighting for the war of independence, all right, rather than anything else. That was the only thing. These people were mature enough, ठीक है. They did not require philosophers like France कि पहले आके फिलोसफर माहौल बनाएंगे 30 साल के लिए, ठीक है, कि इक्वालिटी चाहिए होगी, लिबर्टी चाहिए होगी, फ्रेटर्निटी चाहिए होगी. That was not required from Americans. These people were already mature. All right. So this is what you need to remember from here. Debates में यही आएगा at the max. We have discussed the causes as well as consequences. Are you able to understand? ठीक है. We have understood the causes also. We have understood the role of leaders. So if any question which comes with respect to American Revolution, I hope you will be able to handle it. All right. Let us go to the next topic. Yes. ब्रिटिश हिस्टोरियन है ना, ठीक है, उनकी फ्रीडम है. हिस्टोरियन तो कुछ भी बोल सकते हैं. लाइक इफ वी हैव 4 schools of historiography, British whatever event you're going to tell in, like what they'll say with respect to quit India. If you talk from with British historians, but they'll say it was a barbaric event, created law and order conditions for 2 years, and somehow we were able to restore civilization, right? But if you see from our perspective, it was time to become a leader. Okay, all the major leaders, they were in jail. That's why Gandhiji said do or die. All right. So he came up with a specific adage. Okay, he said violence of the brave is better than non-violence of the coward. Right. अब ये सब सुनने में तो अच्छा लगता ही है ना. He said violence of the brave is better than non-violence of the coward. So जैसे स्कूल को देखोगे उसी के हिसाब से ओपिनियन बन जाएगा. हिस्ट्री में कुछ नहीं है, सिर्फ व्यू पॉइंट्स होते हैं. ऑलराइट, तो यही सेम है. दे आर ओपन टू वट एवर दे विश टू हैव. हमें तो जब आंसर लिखना है, वी हैव टू जस्ट राइट द हिस्टोरियंस व्यू पॉइंट. वी विल नेवर सब्सक्राइब कि ये 100% करेक्ट है, इसने बोला मैंने लिख दिया. दिस इज द रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ द पेपर. ओके, नेक्स्ट वी सी हिस्टोरियंस व्यू पॉइंट ऑन आउटब्रेक ऑफ अमेरिकन सिविल वॉर. Last year there was a question on the impact of American Civil War. Okay, so this year you can expect question on American Revolution. जो topics related होते हैं, UPSC वहाँ से question पूछ लेता है. There was a question specifically on the overall impact. So we can expect either on Abraham Lincoln again, or we can expect on American Revolution. Just read the various viewpoint. What were the causes? The background was created by the debate over slavery. But there were certain other reasons also. What were those reasons? What was the difference in Northern America and Southern America? This was industrialized. That's why it would be better for them to have free labor. Their economy was based upon plantation, so it was better to have slaves. Okay, then what else? The differences between North and South. There were certain differences which eventually led to the Civil War. Second one was with respect to the political parties. So here, Republic Party was dominant in North, and South, Democrats or Democratic Party. And Abraham Lincoln, he belonged to Republican Party. And these people were in favor of abolition of slavery. Okay, because all of you have already seen कि Abraham Lincoln पे 2 बार क्वेश्चन आ चुका है कि describe his perspective on slavery. So what was his perspective? जल्दी से बताओ. What was the perspective of Abraham Lincoln? ठीक है, good, ठीक है, this is also correct. Yes, anyone else? So when he was just a representative, he said if slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. This was his perspective. All right, and he gave a speech in around 1858 in Illinois, in which said India, USA cannot stay specifically half free and half slave. Okay, he said this dichotomy should go away. All of you know that America जब start हुआ था, or when we see the beginning of the promulgation of Constitution, it was mostly on the western side of the North America, on the eastern side. Western side was not having that much of its colonies, but with the period of time, large number of states were taken away. कभी स्पेन से परचेज किया लुइजियाना को, ऐसे कर करके काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें किया. या फिर वी ऑल्सो नो अबाउट कि दे परचेज, कौन सा परचेज किया था? Alaska from Russia. All right, so there was a constant westward expansion in USA, and whenever a new state used to come, this controversy used to emerge. Some of them used to think कि भाई इसको slave बना लेते हैं ताकि our numbers should dominate, while on the other side, if it is from the north, they would say it should be a free state. There was a dichotomy from the beginning itself. So one of the major factor for this civil war was the position of the constitution was ambivalent. Had constitution taken a specific stand, नहीं प्रॉब्लम आती. कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में दोनों चीजें नहीं थी. There was nothing written with respect to right to secede or to leave the union, and second, it did not have any specific opinion on slavery. Because of these two things, this thing propagated. Okay, so with the period of time, large number of contradictions emerged. There were presidential election in 1860, presidential election in 1860, and आपको पता है कि अमेरिका में क्या होता है, नेक्स्ट फेब और जैन एंड में जाके दे अज्यूम दी ऑफिस, है ना. नवंबर में इलेक्शन होते हैं, इन फेब में जाके अज्यूम करते हैं. सो अब्राहम लिंकन वॉन इन 1860 इलेक्शंस, एंड सिंस ही वाज कंसीडर्ड एज अ पर्सन हु वाज इन फेवर ऑफ अबॉलिशमेंट ऑफ स्लेवरी, majority of the states they started seceding from the union. Okay, so and they formed a confederacy of southern state, and who was their head? Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was the head of Southern Confederacy. Okay, and they consider themselves as a separate state from North America. All right, they consider themselves as a separate state from Northern states. All right, and they got recognition from Britain also. Britain को तो करना ही था. What would happen? कि अगर आपके एनिमी को थोड़ी सी चोट लग रही तो आप तो सबसे पहले उसको recognize, हाँ लग गई. All right, that was the main condition. So that's why they recognized it. These people who created the Confederacy, they created their own flag, own currency, own army. So there is one question which has come, I think, in one of the previous year. Do you consider that after beginning of the Civil War, America had two states? America had two states. So at fundamental level, if you see that majority of the institutions which were created, they were just against the North. It was not self-sufficient. Okay? So वैसा कोई question आता है, you need to just counter the argument. First you can give the various viewpoints. Alright, एक viewpoint क्या आ जाएगा कि yes, it was a separate state in which you can mention about they were having their own army, their own president, their own flag, coinage, etc. So all the setup required for a state, it was created. But if we analyze it in detail, Britain ने recognize किया if any opposition or if any enemy is recognizing, that has no value. Right? इंडिया में कोई भी स्टेट है उसको पाकिस्तान रिकॉग्नाइज करता है, उसकी कोई वैल्यू है? somebody says कि हाँ ठीक है चलो खालिस्तान को रिकॉग्नाइज कर देते हैं, will you recognize it? Will you accept it? No, the same situation was there in USA also. If some enemy is coming and recognizing one of the state, will not accept it. All right, so those were no two states. There was only one state. That's why इसको civil war बोलते हैं. Otherwise, it would have been like India and Pakistan war. All right, that's why it's a civil war. Now, the first thing which is again important, even though Abraham Lincoln thought that half slavery and half free, it cannot work for eternity. But in 1861, he changed his stance. He said, if I could preserve the Union by freeing some slaves, I would do it. If I could preserve the Union without freeing any slave, I would still do it. So his first duty became to preserve the Union. All right, his first duty was to preserve the Union, and then the question of slavery came. All right, are you able to understand? So at the initial part, like before assumption of office itself, some of the states, they left the Union. So he was just trying to make them understand कि भाई ठीक है, slavery is not a big issue for me Union is a bigger issue and will not abolish slavery. But once the civil war started, he thought it would be a better strategy to free the slaves. But he did not free the slaves in north part of America. He freed the slaves in the south part. Okay, so that those people, they can also align with the Union. All right, then he came up with the enslavement proclamation. All right, so हमारा he freed the various slaves. That happened by 1863, and by 1865 we have the amendment which eventually nullified the slavery system in USA. ठीक है, समझ में आया इतना पूरा? So course of the war you need to understand from 1861 till 65. 5 साल के लिए फाइट चलता रहा, and eventually it was the defeat of Confederation of Southern States. All right. Now the pertinent question that we have in front of us: what led to the war? What led to the civil war? What was the main question? Okay, that is the main question. उसी के ऊपर आपके पास काफी सारे viewpoints हैं. If we see the viewpoint of J.F. Rhodes, okay, if we see J.F. Rhodes, so he said it was a moral conflict. What is the meaning of moral conflict? That something which is not acceptable in the society was going on, and that's why it was a moral conflict. So he is linking outbreak of civil war to just slavery and subsequent rise of the nation. All right. Second comes from Charles and Mary Beard. Charles Beard is also famous for interpretation of American Constitution. Right? What is his interpretation? What he said? It was an economic document. Okay, उसको भी एक बार डिस्कस कर लेते हैं. So American Civil War was a struggle between two economic groups. All right, the northern advanced democratic and industrial economy, and southern backward and agricultural slave economy. So they also clashed on the issues of tariffs and banks. Third, we see C.W. Ramsdale. He said slavery was unimportant in that it was neither a moral issue nor the single most important cause of civil war. Because what was the biggest issue? the Civil War was precipitated by the victory of Abraham Lincoln, and he was considered as the abolitionist. Okay, so in the immediate term, the Civil War started due to the election of or the victory of Abraham Lincoln, because people, they came under the fear now slavery will be abolished. He did not abolish the slavery, just his winning in the presidential election was a sign for the southern states that this is it, कि अब तो हमारा सब कुछ खत्म होने वाला है. Okay, and second was, it was not the northern part of the union which started the civil war, it was the southern. Okay, southern army, they you can say they started the fire on Fort Sumter. Okay, they started the fire on Fort Sumter, and that was the beginning of American Civil War. Next we see Faulkner. So they say slavery was a surface issue and the real conflict went deeper, covering many other dimensions, political, economic as well as morality. Alright. Then we have Jefferson Davis. So they say a feeling of discrimination and aspiration for liberty against the majority northern state gave the Confederate state a motive to secede and remain independent. Alright. This was the person, Jefferson Davis, who was heading the Confederacy of Southern States. Alright. Then we have states' rights and minority rights. So North being more prosperous than South due to greater industrial wealth and hence contributed to greater control over the federal government. Alright, and that's why the voice of the South was very less, and that's why they wanted to create their own union. Last we see from Eric Foner. So he said free labor ideology dominated the North, which emphasized economic opportunity. By contrast, Southern opposed the free labor policy. They strongly opposed the proposed Homestead Act that would give free farms in the West, fearing the small farmer would oppose plantation slavery. Alright, so we have diverse viewpoints, but if we see correctly, there were certain dichotomies between North and South, and biggest dichotomy was industrialization and plantation. So economy was different. Second, we see with respect to ideas of enlightenment. So the ideas of enlightenment, they were more or less percolated in the North, but in the South we had backward ideas. The ideas of enlightenment did not become a common part of Southern society. Because of these two fundamental differences, we see when Abraham Lincoln, he was appointed, the Southern state, they created a confederacy and went out of the union. Alright, fearing that slavery would be abolished. So slavery was not, slavery was not abolished before the Civil War, it was only abolished afterwards. Okay, is it alright? Let us come to the next topic. So when we talk about socialism, majority of the initial ideas, they came from France, but still the impact of the socialist policies, they became successful in Britain, not in France. Are you able to understand? This question has come many times, 2-3 बार आ चुका है. Even though France was more fertile in socialist ideas, it was Britain where we see the implementation of socialist policies. So what were the reasons behind it? Okay, this is one type of question. Second comes with respect to that the initial socialism, it is known as utopian. What is the meaning of utopian? Idealist. Alright, and what was the nature of this form of nationalism? What was the nature of this form of nationalism? While on the other side, you talk about Marxism, which is considered as scientific socialism or communism. So what are the features of Marxism? Okay, just read how it originated in France. On page number 4, we have to remember at least 4 to 5 people who have contributed in the development of socialist ideas. What are the socialist ideas? मीनिंग क्या होगा सोशलिज्म का? सिर्फ पब्लिक ओनरशिप थोड़ा ना होगा, तो कम्युनिज्म में भी आता है. एम क्या है? व्हाट इज द एम ऑफ सोशलिज्म? इक्वालिटी. ओके, वी शुड हैव अ equal society. How can we create equal society? Right? If they have fair distribution of resources. Okay, there should be fair distribution of resources, then only we can have equal society. That is the basic philosophy of socialism. Why socialism came on the scene? Why? Because of industrial revolution, we were having exploitation. and this exploitation was affecting human lives. All right, that's why we see the rise of socialist ideas. What kind of exploitation was there under the industrialization? The working conditions, they were not good. They were forced to work in areas which were hazardous, right? Second, the number of working hours. If it's the number of working hours, they were kind of not possible for human beings to live for long. अगर रोज 12 से 15 घंटे आपको एक मिल में बैठा दे, कैसे लाइफ हो जाएगी? It's impossible for us to even imagine that, right? Third, if we see that not only them, what these industries did, they started bringing in child labor. Why child? They asked for less money, and specifically in coal mines, their small hand can lead to better extraction. Alright, so all such kinds of problems they started with industrialization. We also see that these industries did not care for the housing as well as other important requirement of the laborers. That's why creation of slums, etc. So all these problems they started with industrialization. Alright, so for socialist ideas to prevail, we require a certain vision in which people can live in an equal society, and when they can live in an equal society, when they have fair distribution of resources. सबसे important चीज क्या होती है? रोटी, कपड़ा और मकान. कम से कम ये तीन चीज तो कम से कम fair distribution we can expect, right? So these were the basic ideas which started emerging. Like if we see role of Rousseau, what was the role of Rousseau? He came up with the theory of social contract as well as discourse on the origin of inequality. So he differentiated between natural inequality versus artificial inequality. So he said, suppose if we see at all of us are different, right? If we see from natural, that is natural inequality. I may have different talent, you may have different talent. That is natural inequality. But once we see that materialism comes into our lives, it leads to unnatural inequality, okay, or artificial inequality. So this concept was given by Rousseau, and he said we should live very close to nature rather than going into the cities, etc. So this was the general layout by Rousseau. Then we see role of Jacobians. So Jacobians was a club, right, which was in favor of socialism, and this was very active in France, okay. And all of us know about the reign of terror. What was the reign of terror? Whoever person who was considered as anti to the revolutionary ideas, they were guillotined. बुलाया कि इक्वालिटी चाहिए होगा कि नहीं चाहिए, आओ, राइट. सो whoever person was seen, और इवन कोई भी उसकी अफवाह फैला दी किसी ने, राइट, कि they are against the revolutionary forces, those people they were executed or guillotined. So that was the role of Jacobians. These people were in ultra form of democracy, कि बिल्कुल equal democracy. Today do we have equal democracy? No, it is not possible. Alright, ऐसा हमने गवर्नेंस प्रोजेक्ट वर्ल्ड में कहीं नहीं देखा है where equal democracy can be created. Such project was the role of Jacobians. Then when we talk about French Revolution, so all of us know they were fighting against privileges. The fight against privileges, idea of equality, liberty, fraternity, all those ideas, they were socialist in nature. So the initial ideas of socialism, they came from here. Alright. Then along with this, we have a large number of scholars that we have in the handouts. So if we see Francois Babeuf, and he wrote Conspiracy of Equals. Kindly remember the name of the book, Conspiracy of Equals. Okay. So, and he also has a newspaper, the Tribune of the People. Alright. And he was advocating for the poor and calling for a popular revolt against the Directory. Directory was in power through which year? 1795 to 99. Okay. By which time there was a coup by whom? Napoleon. Okay. So he was a leader of advocacy for democracy, the abolition of private property and the equality of results, and that's why he was executed in his region. Alright. Next we see Saint Simon. So he says, from each according to his capacity, to each according to his work. So this is what he came up with. He advocated public control of property through central planning. Then we have Charles Fourier. So he envisioned a society that would be in keeping with the human needs and desires. Okay. Then we have Louis Blanc. So he has written Organization of Labor in 1839, and he promoted a scheme of state finance but worker controlled social workshop. like PSUs. State should control them, but labor union, they are going to be powerful. All right, that would guarantee work for everyone and lead gradually to a socialist society. Then we have Proudhon, and he talked about specifically abolishment of private property as well as believed in actual economic equality. Okay, these are the various people, and they are known as utopian. Why utopian? सब कुछ बता के चले गए, ये नहीं बताया एग्जीक्यूशन कैसे होगा. Okay, so these were the initial socialist ideas. That's why this utopian word was used by Karl Marx. So what is the problem that you see with these socialist ideas? ये successful क्यों नहीं हुए? चलो ठीक है, उसके अलावा भी मतलब why they were not successful? कुछ तो reason होंगे ना. First of all, they were trying to just implement the socialist ideas within the capitalist framework. This was their biggest limitation. They were trying to implement these ideas within capitalist framework. Like Gandhi ji, he came up with the concept of trusteeship. कितना trusteeship मिला आज तक हमें 70 साल में? Okay, when you do not change the overall framework, it is very difficult to implement those ideas. Who will take the responsibility? कि अगर हुआ है कि नहीं हुआ है? Today we are trying to go towards capitalism के साथ साथ में कुछ socialist ideas, they are implemented by the state. स्टेट ने करवाया ना सब कुछ इम्प्लीमेंट. इफ यू गो, कोई भी कंपनी है, आपका प्रोविडेंट फंड में जो कंट्रीब्यूशन है वो स्टेट की रेगुलेशंस है, लेबर लॉस है, किसने करवाए सारे एग्जीक्यूशन? दे आर डन बाय द स्टेट. नोबडी टॉक्ड अबाउट दैट कि स्टेट का रोल कैसे होगा इन स्प्रेडिंग सोशलिज्म. सो मेजॉरिटी ऑफ दीज आइडियाज दे वर विद इन द कैपिटलिस्ट फ्रेमवर्क. सो इट वाज अप टू द कैपिटलिस्ट टू ईदर इम्प्लीमेंट इट और रिजेक्ट इट. That's why they failed. And second, they never gave a new vision and then practical ideas to implement it. Like when we talk about Karl Marx said there is going to be a communist society, but it will only come up with class struggle. So here they were not going for class struggle. They believed class cooperation से काम चल जाएगा. Okay, so practical ideas were not there. That's why these ideas, they remained just in the books. There was no practical implementation. एक आधी जगह successful हुआ था. Like if we talk about Robert Owen, you can remember his name. He was from England. Okay, and he is considered as the father of cooperative movement. So he did a lot of things for the workers of his mill, and even then he was able to improve the profit. All right, so that's why he was the one person who was able to implement one of the socialist product, but the scale was very less. किसी बंदे ने आके अपने 100 वर्कर्स को खुश कर भी दिया, that is not going to transform the society. That scale is very less. All right, that's why overall we call them utopian. Then comes Karl Marx. He came up with Communist Manifesto, and he gave certain ideas which had coherence, which could be understood by the masses, which could be implemented by the leaders. Okay, like we have Lenin. all right, which could be implemented by Mao. So he was able to strike a chord with the masses, and that's why he gave a certain plan which could be implemented. Okay, so he was the person who said that class struggle is going to be required. He differentiated the society into two major classes. First was going to be bourgeois, and second one proletariats or the working class. And he said, without class struggle, we are not going to get anything. So a consistent class struggle is required from the proletariats, then only they are going to defeat the capitalist. All right. Then he believed in violent revolution. So in a way he justified use of violence for achieving the end. What was the end goal? Dictatorship of the proletariats. That was the end goals of communism. And for that, even if a violent revolution is required, he justified it. ये भी कर लो. All right. And he said that in the long run, capitalism will be replaced by communism, but there is going to be an intermediate stage of socialism. All right. And this communism, the ultimate stage would be role of communes. So just like Gandhiji was also against the state. So he said there should be a stateless society. And same was the idea of Karl Marx. UPSC ने पूछ लिया था ना एक साल, यही चीज पूछ ली थी कि इवेंचुअली किसी को पता ही नहीं था, इसके बारे में ज्यादा पढ़ा नहीं था बैठ के. तो he said eventually from capitalism will go towards communism, but थोड़ा बहुत जो पार्ट रहेगा which will of socialism. And when we'll reach to the best stage of communism, there we do not require any government, we'll just have communes, and this will be a stateless society. एक बार नेक्स्ट पेज पे आओ जल्दी से, पेज नंबर 6. विल डिस्कस दैट क्वेश्चन, दैट टॉपिक अगेन, ब्रिटेन वाला पार्ट. बट एक बार जल्दी से मार्क्सियन सोशलिज्म पढ़ो, सो दैट कि सोशलिज्म आपका टॉपिक भी एक साथ प्रिपेयर हो जाएगा अलॉन्ग विद द डिबेट. पॉइंट नंबर 5 में ना एक जगह गलती से टाइप हो रखा है, ड्यूरिंग हिज स्टे इन ब्रुसेल्स इन 1845. वो पहले ठीक है, बाद में गलती से 1945 हो गया, उसको चेंज कर लो. पॉइंट नंबर 5, Remember the important doctrines. Okay. So we have 4 important doctrines. One is determinism of economic interpretation of history, dialecticism, class struggle, and labor value theory. Because UPSC there are 10 markers. Describe the elements of communism. Okay, same answer आएगा. Or they have also asked the question, describe the nature of pre-Marxian socialism. Nature of pre-Marxian socialism. वहाँ पे आपको वो सारे पॉइंट्स बताने हैं जो हमने डिस्कस करें, ठीक है, एंड देन कंपेयर इट विद द मार्क्सियन सोशलिज्म. दोनों के बीच में कम से कम 5-5 पॉइंट आपको याद रखने हैं. 10 मार्कर में काम आएगा. रिमेंबर द डिटेल, लाइक इफ यू सी द डिटेल. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल ही वाज द एडिटर ऑफ राइन न्यूज़पेपर. ओके. सेकंड, he started the International Communist League. Okay, he became part of it, and eventually in 1848 he came up with Communist Manifesto. 1848. All right, and then we see in 1867 he came up with the Das Kapital. All right, so these are the important works. So introduction में ये सब लिख सकते हो. In his various works, Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, he has put forward the various communist ideas. So for introduction, if we know certain detail, it becomes easy to write very good introduction. Let us come to the Marxist doctrines. The first one, he talks about determinism. So he says the victory to the working class, but asks them to make sacrifice in order to bring about essential developments. Okay, so the first one is determinism, but the problem is he was failed to answer. Okay, why workers shall sacrifice themselves. All right. He said if the fall of capitalism is inevitable, तो हम क्यों sacrifice करें. ठीक है, जैसे कि अगर किसी ने आके तुम्हें पंडित ने बोल दिया यार तुम्हारा तो सिविल्स पास होने वाला है, तो हम क्यों मेहनत करें. Right, it's that kind of philosophy. Next comes materialism. So materialism concept of history. This was an important thing which was explained by him. So he said economic status of an individual influence their ideas. Okay, economic status of an individual influence their ideas, and on the basis of this he came up with a theory. He said during the ancient period there were 2 classes, master and slave. During the medieval period, there were again 2 classes. One was the feudal lord, other was serf. And he said during the current period, this is bourgeois versus proletariat. All right. So he used this economic determinism to tell Protestants, now you have an opportunity to change this forever. All right, and this is known as materialism. Through dialecticism, he was able to explain that revolution was necessary. All right, so he was a person who was very kind of adamant कि revolution होना ही चाहिए. इतना revolution के पीछे किसी कोई नहीं पड़ा जितना ये पड़े यहाँ के. All right, we connect that French philosophers, they are not directly connected with the revolution, but this is the person who हर writing में आज revolution करना है. All right, and eventually these ideas were picked up by Lenin. Lenin ने pick up किया, and we see the Bolshevik Revolution. So one thing you need to understand, even though he was writing from 1848 till the beginning of 1900s, but there was no major impact on world society. कोई revolution नहीं हुआ ना उसके हिसाब से, कुछ organization बनी, Paris Commune etc. like that, but there was no major impact. It was only with the coming of Bolshevik Revolution that this Marxist ideology it picked up pace. Okay, Next we see labor value theory. Now this is very important theory. So what it says, there are different factors of production. What are those? Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So he says, eventually everything depends upon labor. Everything depends upon labor. अगर labor काम नहीं करेगा तो ये सब fail होने वाला है. Everything is going to fail. Then he says, it is because of labor surplus. Okay, the value which is provided by labor, उसकी वजह से क्या होता है? Labor surplus, and through this it leads to profits. So he says eventually it was the labor which can be linked with the profits. So he said, why this profit should go to entrepreneur, not the labor. Eventually in capitalistic society the profit goes to entrepreneur. He said this surplus labor which is provided by the labor, all right, उसका कुछ फायदा नहीं मिल रहा है उसको. Okay, that's why he specifically mentioned this is the exploitation. The profit generation initiative is in fact an exploitation of the labor class. Okay, and this is the labor value theory. Next he talks about capitalism, the collapse of capitalism, which we have already understood, right? That from the capitalism there is going to be a pathway through socialism, and eventually it's going to be the communes, and it will be a stateless society. Okay, so there are a lot of weaknesses in his theory. We cannot say it is totally coherent, all right, but eventually what happened, it was able to influence the political class, and two important revolutions of world history, Russian Revolution and Chinese Revolution. They are based on Marxist ideals. Okay, now let us come back to our first important topic. We were discussing that the socialist ideas, they emerged from France, right? But they became successful in Britain. So what were the reasons? Just see the reasons very quickly. First thing which is required for socialism to prosper is stable state. If there is no stable state, socialism cannot win. All right. So there was political stability in Britain, because of which large number of reforms were done by the Britain government, which France could not do. France had revolution in 1789, then in 1830, then 1848, then 1871 there was dislodgement of Napoleon III. So it could not remain politically stable, and this was the major reason why Britain में इसका impact ज़्यादा दिखा हमें. ठीक है. Next we see liberal bourgeois. So the bourgeois class of Britain was liberal, while the bourgeois class of France was relatively fundamentalist. वो करने नहीं देती थी. Okay, that's why we can see gradual changes in Britain. Third, better condition of British workers, and these workers, they did not take the path of revolution. ठीक है ना. Normally British, they are considered as very conservative people, कि धीरे धीरे करके चेंजेस कर दो. डेमोक्रेसी 1200 से स्टार्ट हुई थी, बेशक से 1800 तक चलने दो, 600 साल में आ जाएगी तो भी ठीक है. These people are conservative in nature. That's why they have followed the model of Fabian socialism, कि gradual manner में socialism चल जाता है. All right. And last we see the various socialist legislation in Britain. Okay, Factory Act, Mines Act, 10R Act, Public Health Act, Education Act. All these acts were passed by Britain. There is one more important reason. Industrialization was more in Britain. So the worst impacts of industrialization that could be seen in Britain. France में तो industrialization हो ही नहीं रहा था ना उस time पे. So how can impact of socialism can be seen? All right. If there is exploitation, then only there will be remedy. If there is no exploitation, remedy क्या करोगे क्या? All right. But in Britain we see the maximum level of exploitation. Since industrialization started from Britain, that's why the impact of socialist policies were required in Britain rather than in France. Is it clear? These are the various factors which you need to remember. Okay. Let us come to the next topic, page number 8, French Revolution. Similarly, there is this topic, that why French Revolution started from France, or why the revolution started from France. This is the pertinent question. Why France? Okay, why not any other country? Can you give me any reasons? If we see 18th century, majority of the countries, they were having same set of conditions, right? If we see the worker class, if we see the privileges, if we see the aristocratic class, so they were having same set of condition. Then why the revolution started in France? This is one question which has become a source of debate. But eventually we are able to understand, see the comparison of France with other European nations. First, if we see the condition of society, so the condition of French people as a whole was no way worse than other people, right? Even German, Polish and Hungary peasant, they were having no personal plot of land, as well as no freedom to marry and no right to move freely. It means कि यहाँ पे society की condition was at least better than these countries. First thing. Second, we see the condition of peasants. So there was no serfdom in France. Alright, they were eventually free. In general, the political power of the feudal nobility has also been broken, but it was very high in Germany. So the condition of peasant was also better. Degree of despotism, it was more or less prosperous. Even though the monarchy was bankrupt, nation was prosperous. And last, we see the status of middle class. So next to England, this was the most numerous, prosperous, intelligent and enlightened middle class. So if we see these general comparison, revolution could have broke out anywhere in Europe. It not necessarily have to be France. But there were certain factors which were there in France which eventually drive the revolution. See, the first important part was monarchy. It was the monarchy which eventually led to the revolution. What were the faults of monarchy? It was very weak. It was not able to impose taxes on time. Okay, और जब टैक्स नहीं कर पाए impose, there was one registering body, French Parliament. Okay, उसको भी बात मान लिया किंग ने, ठीक है कि आप मना कर रहे हो तो मैं बुला लेता हूँ स्टेट जनरल को. All right, this was the weak monarchy which eventually led to the revolution in France. This was not the condition with other countries. Okay, so it was the weak monarchy. Second, we see the nature of society. Since these people were having good condition in comparison to other, they were able to drive and understand the ideas of revolution. That's why societal competence was also important. If we see the third, participation in revolution. It was France which was directly impacted by American Revolution. One, because of the bankruptcy, and second, because of the ideas which flowed from America to France. Okay. Next, we see the philosophical base. So maximum number of philosophers, they were active in France. Even though other places also we had philosophers, they were most active. Third, decline in feudalism. Why these people were having the problem with privileges? Privileges were there in every country of Europe, but along with privileges, feudalistic people, they also had certain duties. These duties were taken away by King Louis XIV. So that's why duties were not there. They were only enjoying privileges in France. That's why every Frenchman was angry. Why are we giving privileges to these people? They have no duties. Okay. Next, we see enlightened middle class, as well as last very important part is administrative centralization. In no other European country, the capital started playing a very important role, like Paris. Okay, and whichever section of society was able to control Paris, they were able to control France. So such level of administrative centralization was not there in any of the other country. Okay, because of these factors, we see that revolution started from France rather than any other country in Europe. Okay, if any such question comes, I hope you will be able to handle it. From French Revolution, one more question which normally comes is the role of philosophers. Some say it is because of philosophers the revolution started. The other talks about national conditions. So which one is right? For the outburst of French Revolution, which one is important, the role of philosophers or the national conditions? You tell me. Always going to be national condition. Philosopher आप बन कहाँ पाओगे अगर national condition उतनी खराब ना हो तो. Okay, revolution eventually happened because of national conditions. It was just that had these philosophers not been there, तो दो तीन चीजें हो सकती थी. First of all, this revolution could have been delayed. कुछ साल बाद आता, right? Because here we see what was the main condition? Bankrupt plus monarchy was inefficient. These two were the most important condition which precipitated the revolution, and the main demand was of equality. These were the problems in the national condition. These two were the most destabilizing factors. पैसा नहीं बचा, that's why monarchy was required to find a solution, but monarchy was not able to find any solution. So in the end, this monarchy summoned the Estate General. And since monarchy summoned the Estate General, because of this, we see the beginning of French Revolution. But had these philosophers not been there, what could have been the impact on French Revolution? That is something which I want to ask from your side. One, it could have been delayed. कुछ साल बाद आता, जरूरी नहीं कि उस टाइम पे आता. Then tell me. Yes, the ideas which these philosophers gave, it means French Revolution's impact could have been limited in nature. Revolution हो जाता, but the impact could have been limited in nature. Alright, without these high sounding ideas, equality, liberty, fraternity, which were provided by the philosophers. Third, people would have found very difficult to understand the idea of New France, कि France society होनी कैसे चाहिए. Okay, so all these things may not have been there had we not had the philosophers. But like David Thompson says, their role in the outburst of the revolution was remote and indirect. Are you able to understand this? Remote and indirect. Why indirect? None of them took participated in the revolution. By 1778, Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, all were dead. All of them were dead. It means none of them could have participated in the revolution. They did not participate. So direct participation was not there. Number one. Second, these philosophers, they were getting patronage from the aristocratic class. They were getting patronage. So कहानियां तो लिख रहे थे, इनको फर्क थोड़ा ना पड़ रहा था. Majority of these people were well off. So they were not getting affected because of equality or privileges. Alright, they were not getting affected. So this was a bourgeois leadership. They were not getting affected by monarchy. It means they just put forward certain ideas which were very powerful, and they brought the day of the revolution near. Alright, are you able to understand? It was these ideas which brought the French Revolution near, and second, they were able to create the impact of the French Revolution, because without these ideas, अरे लोग fight किसके लिए करेंगे? Like if you see the revolt of 1857, what was the problem? What was the problem with that revolution or with the revolt? They were not able to come up with any alternative. They were trying to put the clock back कि ब्रिटिश के आने से पहले जैसा इंडिया था वैसा बनाना है. वो कैसा इंडिया था किसी को पता नहीं था. Right? But here they were talking about a new France. This France should be free from privileges. Every citizenship should have rights. Government जो है वो डेमोक्रेटिक होना चाहिए, आर्बिट्रेरी रूल नहीं होना चाहिए. ऑल दीज आइडियाज हु गेव देम? philosophers. Okay, so there is one question which have come previously in PYQ also. No intellectual revolution like that of French Revolution happens in a vacuum. Okay, no revolution as encompassing as French Revolution happens in a vacuum. What is the meaning of that? Without ideas we cannot have a revolution like French Revolution. We require, देखो आउटब्रेक के रीजंस तो अलग होंगे, दैट इज समथिंग विच डिपेंड्स अपॉन द सोसाइटी, पॉलिटी, इकोनॉमी, रिलीजन, कल्चरल क्लास. बट अगर अच्छा रेवोल्यूशन करना है जस्ट लाइक फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन, तो यू रिक्वायर द philosophical ideas. Without that it's not going to happen. Is it clear? There are two set of questions. In one you have to negate the direct role of philosophers, which is the most common question which comes from French Revolution. But the second question is in which UPSC asks about the no important revolution or no revolution like French Revolution can happen in an intellectual vacuum. It means you're going to talk about the political, economic, social, cultural ideas which were generated by the philosophers, and without these ideas the French Revolution could have been just another revolution without any important outcome. Okay, so ideas are important for the overall perspective but not from the perspective of outburst. Outburst उस पर डिपेंड कभी नहीं करेगा. It will always depend upon circumstances, and these circumstances you can always have in the national life, not in the realm of ideas. But nevertheless these ideas are important. अपना constitution उठा के देख लो, उसके बिना आज की governance possible नहीं है. And all such ideas have come from French Revolution. Is it clear? Let us come to the next topic. हाँ, तो he talks about had there been no Rousseau, there would have been no revolution. This was the quote of Napoleon. So Napoleon, whatever he is saying, he is just trying to highlight the importance of ideas of Rousseau. But when we critically analyze it, Rousseau was not directly responsible for the revolution. But yes, Rousseau was the only person who gave or who legitimized any specific role of the masses. He gave the theory of social contract, in which he says if the government is not abiding by the social contract, masses can change such government. So he justified revolution. So at the level of ideas, Rousseau was very influential, but specifically he did not started the revolution. That we know. If he was the force behind it, he was not the person who was doing it. जैसे कि यूटिलिटेरियन आइडियोलॉजी वाज देयर इन ब्रिटेन, तो गवर्नर जनरल के ऊपर इन्फ्लुएंस हो रही थी. डायरेक्टली आके यहाँ जर्मी बंथम नहीं कर चलो आज से ये काम करने शुरू करते हैं. दैट वाज नॉट देयर. सो फिलोसफर्स तो आइडियाज देके चले जाते हैं बुक में लिख के. इट इज अप टू अस हु आर पार्ट ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट टू इम्प्लीमेंट इट. ओके, वो उनकी कैपेबिलिटी के ऊपर है. ऑलराइट, नेक्स्ट वी सी यूनिफिकेशन ऑफ जर्मनी. So with respect to unification of Germany, there are three specific types of debates. One is, was this achieved by coal and iron or blood and iron? That is very common. Second, what was the role of Bismarck? Was he trying to unify Germany or trying to divide Germany? And third perspective is with respect to Battle of Sadhua, that rather than Austria, it was France who was defeated at Sadhua. These are the three specific debates which we need to understand. Just read the first one quickly and then we'll see the next two. इसमें French Revolution. Conclusion is because of these specific factors, it happened in France. Let us see the first part, coal and iron. So debates, why it started? Otto von Bismarck, he said, it is only blood and iron which can unify Germany, while we have one famous economist, that is John Maynard Keynes, right? So he says that the German Empire was built on coal and iron rather than blood and iron. All right. Let us see the debate. So the first we talk about the role of coal and iron. So what is the role of coal and iron? We try to create economic dependency. Suppose if there is economic dependency among 5-6 small states, they'll come together. It will create some form of unification. So this happened in Germany. We see the beginning of Zollverein. This was one customs union which was created in 1819. All right, and all the German states except Austria, they joined it. So that's why this brought majority of the states of Germany together. All right, and this created Prussia as an economic leader. All right, as well as it also led to isolation of Austria because Austria refused to join this customs union. And finally, when we talk about economic dependency, so which class is going to get benefit out of this? Middle class. Okay, so that's why there was shifting of power from small states towards middle class, which started asking for unification, which wanted empire building, because that's the manner in which Europe was able to go ahead during the 19th century. Like if we talk about the case of Britain, Britain was very prosperous because it was having colonies. Okay, and same demand started coming from German sides once they were having economic dependency. Okay, so this is one part of the debate. But if we see the second side, blood and iron. So coal and iron on itself was not sufficient. It was not sufficient, even though it created the base. It created the base, but if we see only coal and iron, so it was not sufficient. All right, and that could be seen in 1848 as well as in 1851. Both the times they were failures of German unification, right? But when blood and iron started, when the policies or the war was started by Bismarck, there we see unification of Germany, war with Denmark, Austria, France. All these were important. All right, but if we have to conclude, what should be our viewpoint? That the policy of blood and iron which was pursued by Bismarck would have been difficult to pursue had there not been coal and iron. Can we compare it with Italy? Italy was economically weak. It was not having resources, because of which it had to depend upon the foreign powers for unification. But that was not required by Germany because economic resources were there. That's why only requirement was to follow blood and iron. Otherwise, they could have been dependent upon the other countries for unification. Okay, that's the first thing. We are just talking about unification. Second, we are talking about the impact of that unification. Had this coal and iron not been there, the impact of German unification could not have led to change of balance of power. Okay, they were able to topple France from 1871 onwards till 1914. Who dominated the Europe? Germany. So the impact of unification could have been meager had there been no coal and iron, and this was the case in Italy. Italy आया, Italy बना, किसी को फर्क नहीं पड़ा, right? But when we talk about Germany, Germany became the master. Okay, and they replaced France. So that's why coal and iron created the base for German unification, and on which the policy of blood and iron flowered. Okay, without which both of them, so both of them, they are important, and one helped the other. Like coal and iron provided resources, they were able to fight wars. Again, we see development of industries. Alright, so both of them, they were working with one another rather than in separate silos. That is not the condition. Okay, so अगर ऐसा कोई debate आता है in 10 marker, I hope you will be able to write it. Now the second debate starts with respect to Bismarck. Are you able to understand the manner in which he created the German unification? From 1862, when he became the chancellor, and by 1871 he was able to finish off the project. But the manner in which this person created unification is open to various debates. So we have one historian, that is LCB Seaman. Just see his perspective. The unification of Germany was the one thing Bismarck was determined to prevent. नॉर्मली अगर ये क्वेश्चन डायरेक्ट आ जाए तो हम सोचेंगे यार ये क्या है, ये तो फादर ऑफ द नेशन है वहां के, लेकिन हाउ ही प्रिवेंटेड, तो इस पर्सपेक्टिव को समझना पड़ेगा. ओके, तो द पर्सपेक्टिव मीन्स दिस पर्सन वाज मोर इंटरेस्टेड इन प्रूशिया, okay, rather than Germany. So he followed the policies. We say there should be Prussianization of Germany rather than Germanization of Prussia. We are going to dominate the smaller German states. So first of all, his policy was Prussianization of Germany. Second, he wanted to dominate the smaller state. It was not the way कि भाई ठीक है हम सारे भाई भाई बन गए. No, it was domination of smaller state. Third, his plan was to oust Austria as well as Czechoslovakia. Okay, so these territories, they were also German, but they could not become part of Germany because Bismarck did not wanted them to. So a large sizable portion of German speaking people, they remained outside the empire. All right. There was also one instance in 1850 which is written in your handout, Convention of Olmütz. Okay, remember it, underline it. All right. At that point of time, Prussian king was forced by Austria to abandon his proposed union of all German states, and in this Bismarck supported Austria. Why? He said a unification which is offered by liberal people is always going to stay weak. Okay, that's why at times he was even working against the nationalism, just to make sure कि मेरी vision के हिसाब से unification होना चाहिए, then only will consider it, otherwise it should not happen. All right, and last you see disguised nomenclature, that in 1871 it was more of a Prussian empire rather than German empire. Alright, because of these reasons, LCB Seaman has said that unification of Germany was the one thing Bismarck was determined to prevent. तो अगर 10 मार्कर में आता है तो you have to critically examine like this, rather than उसको counter करना start कर दिया पहली बार से, नहीं मैं नहीं मानता. He followed the policy of blood and iron. Okay. Come to the last, Battle of Sadhua. You got one handout today or two handout? दो हैंडआउट मिला ना, इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में मिल गया, नहीं मिला, ठीक है वो कल मिल जाएगा. चलो ठीक है, इट इज ऑलरेडी अच्छा अपलोड हो चुका है हैंडआउट. ओके, सो लेट अस सी बैटल ऑफ सडोवा. सो व्हाट वाज द बैटल ऑफ सडोवा? इट वाज फॉट बिटवीन ऑस्ट्रिया एंड प्रूशिया. It happened in 1866. Okay, it was the second major war which was fought by Bismarck. First one was with Denmark, which led to the liberation of two small duchies, which were Holstein and Schleswig. Okay, that was in 1863. This was the second war which was fought between Austria and Prussia. During this war, the third party was France, because France was dominating Europe. Like दुनिया में कुछ भी होता है तो एक पार्टी आज की डेट में यूएसए होता है, because USA is dominating the world. Similarly, in 1866, the third party was France. Okay, because the policy of France overall has been to have a divided Germany. That's why Hitler said जर्मनी की सबसे बड़ी mortal enemy कौन है? France. France is the mortal enemy of German state, because this policy of divided Germany has been in place since the beginning of 18th century, and even Napoleon did the same. What Napoleon did? He created a confederation of smaller German states so that they can be used as a counter to Prussia and Austria. That was the policy of Napoleon. All right. So this policy of divided Germany has been pursued by France. Okay, and this was one such occasion when one German state was fighting with the other, Austria versus Prussia. So at this point of time, Prussia gave an indication to France that after the war you will get some territory. Okay, and this was done by Bismarck. All right. So France thought कि बहुत लंबा वॉर होने वाला है, I'll come at my own time of choosing, और अपने हिसाब से आउटकम को डिसाइड करेंगे. But the problem was this ended in 7 weeks, and outcome of this battle of Sadhua was very difficult for France to digest. What was the outcome? Prussia won, and they created confederation of 21 northern German states. So 21 states came together. So a powerful Germany came into being. Okay, so because of these two reasons, one, the war ended very quickly, number one. Second, creation of confederation of northern German states. Okay, these two outcomes affected France, because France was having monopoly over power in Europe, and they thought कि अब इसके बाद क्या करना है. That's why the debate is, it was Austria which got defeated in 1866, but it was France who felt defeated. Just see the point. So this Prussian victory upset all the calculation of French Emperor Napoleon III. He thought it would be long drawn and evenly contested. Okay, and he can intervene at the right moment and enable him to extract some territorial gain. Second, it cracked the hopes of France. Okay, it dissipated all the hopes and traditional policy of France to keep Germany weak and divided, because German unification का सबसे important step है ये. All right, one of the most important, because North got unified, and in the next battle of Sedan we see even the unification of overall Germany. Next we see weak monarchical policy of France. So Napoleon's weak and vacillating policy was largely responsible for neutral attitude. Okay, because help was sought by Austria. Austria ने कहा हमें आके help कर दो, इन्होंने कहा नहीं अभी पहले war लड़ो फिर बाद में देखेंगे. All right, so this neutral policy was because of the weak monarchy. Third, we see egoistic clashes, because France was the intellectual head of Europe since 1789 till 1871. Okay, for roughly 80 years, France was the intellectual head, but this was bound to transform just after 5 years of Sadhua, and that's why Sadhua was important for France also, because France ही next target रहेगा ना प्रूशिया के लिए after this victory over Austria. Let's see the last point. This was the prelude to war. Okay, and French public used to say revenge for Sadhua. Okay, because of all these factors we see that it was France who felt defeated, even though Austria was defeated in the real battle. Okay, and इसके दो reasons हैं. Austria was treated very liberally. Normally क्या होता है, after every war indemnity दो, territory दो, ये करो वो करो, but nothing was done by Prussia, because Prussia knew that neutrality of Austria would be required when they are going to fight with France. So he was very calculative. बहुत प्यार से लगा रहे कोई नहीं यार, गलती हो जाती है कभी कभार, फाइट हो जाती है. ओके, छोटा सा बॉर्डर की फाइट है ये तो चल जाएगा ना अगली बार, कोई बात नहीं. ओके, सो ही वाज वेरी स्ट्रेटेजिक, so they were not treated in a harsh manner. दैट्स वाई इवन आफ्टर द वॉर इन दोनों के बीच में राइवलरी नहीं हुई. ओके, देयर वाज नो मेजर राइवलरी व्हिच कुड बी एक्सप्लॉइटेड बाय फ्रांस to keep Germany divided. So this long term policy of divided Germany, it got a backlash because of Battle of Sadhua, and that was the main reason why French felt humiliated कि हमारी long term policy खराब हो गई, even though defeat was of Austria. Okay, so क्या करते हैं, बाकी की जो debates हैं वो कल करते हैं, ठीक है, tomorrow at the same time, and then we'll also cover इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस. ओके, तो उसको ऑनलाइन हैंड आउट है अपलोड, एक बार जस्ट रीड करके आ जाना, कल आपको हैंड आउट फिजिकल तो मिल ही जाएगा. ऑलराइट, तो आई होप इफ कोई और क्वेश्चन है, ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स आर बी हैविंग एनी क्वेश्चन? यस अंशुमन, वी कैन सी दैट ऑस्ट्रिया स्पेसिफिक कुछ क्वेश्चन आ सकता है. यस, कि व्हाट वाज द रोल ऑफ ऑस्ट्रिया, बिकॉज ऑस्ट्रिया इट अफेक्टेड द unification of Italy as well as Germany. That's why some Austria specific question can come. Yes. हाँ, तो इम्पैक्ट आपको पता चल ही गया ना, फ्रॉम 1871 till 1914 all the major developments they were driven by Germany. Okay, while Italy kept on crying. कुछ नहीं हुआ, कुछ इम्पैक्ट ही नहीं आया उसका इंटरनेशनल बॉडीज पे. हाँ नहीं, वो उसका रीजन वही है ना, मैंने जो आपको समझाया था कि इन इटली देयर वाज नो कोल एंड आयरन, दे वर इकोनॉमिकली वीक, एंड इफ यू डू नॉट हैव इकोनॉमिक पावर, आपके पास हार्ड पावर कभी आएगी नहीं ना. अब इंडिया के पास सॉफ्ट पावर ज्यादा क्यों है? इकोनॉमिकली हम वीक हैं आज भी. वी कैन नॉट फाइट विद चाइना. कैन वी फाइट? नहीं, उनकी जो इकोनॉमी हमसे 4-5 गुना है. हम अगर यहाँ पे 2.5 ट्रिलियन डॉलर के आसपास हैं, तो चाइना कहाँ पे है? 8-9 के आसपास जा चुका है वो. हाँ वही 10-3-4 टाइम्स है ना. हाँ 19 वो नहीं इतना 19 नहीं यार, 19 तो यूएसए का है. हाँ उतना तो यूएस भी नहीं है, वो पीपीपी लेवल पे होगा. पीपीपी समथिंग डिफरेंट, बट रियल टर्म्स में बात कर रहे हैं हम. तो अगर हम 2.5 के आसपास है तो वो 10 के आसपास है, 4 गुना हमसे. So you require economic power. Without economic power, you cannot have impact on international relations. उसके अलावा तो फिर सॉफ्ट पावर करना पड़ेगा कि इंटरनेशनल योगा डे बना दिया, ठीक है, बट उससे कुछ एज सच डायरेक्ट किसी भी कंट्री की तुम स्ट्रेटजी को चेंज नहीं कर सकते. हम श्रीलंका को क्यों क्रेडिट ऑफ लाइन दे रहे? क्यों उनको लाइन ऑफ क्रेडिट मिल रहा है? कुछ तो रीजन होगा. हाँ, प्रो चाइना ना चले जाएं, लॉन्ग टर्म में हमारे साथ में रहे, तो हम हमारे पास वही उतनी ही इकोनॉमिक पावर है कि हम श्रीलंका को थोड़ा बहुत चावल देके आ जाए. उतना ही है अपना आज की डेट में, ठीक है, या फिर हम अफ्रीका को थोड़ा बहुत दे दें. दैट्स द सेम प्रॉब्लम विच वाज फेस्ड बाय इटली. इटली में आज भी मेजर इंडस्ट्रियल इकोनॉमी नहीं है, ठीक है. दैट वाज द रीजन, दैट्स व्हाई इंटरनेशनल इम्पैक्ट वाज वेरी लेस. दे वर नॉट टेकन सीरियसली बाय एनी पावर, एंड दैट्स व्हाई दे एंडेड अप कमिंग इनटू द ट्रिपल अलायंस. क्यों बनाया था उन्होंने ट्रिपल अलायंस? बिकॉज अकेले कुछ कर नहीं पा रहे थे, एंड दैट्स लेड टू दी वर्ल्ड वॉर 1. बट मेजर इंपीरियलिस्टिक इंपैक्ट वाज ओनली ऑफ जर्मनी. ओके, जैसे कि आपकी जितनी भी होंगी फ्रॉम 1871 ऑनवर्ड्स, कौन कौन से इंपॉर्टेंट ट्रीटीज हैं? वी हैव 1878 ट्रीटी ऑफ बर्लिन which impacted the eastern question. Then we have again one more conference of 1884-85 which divided the continent of Africa. तो ऐसे सारे events they happened और they were lead was taken by Germany, while on the other side Italy क्या था, एक आके बस ट्रिपल अलायंस का पार्ट बन के बैठ गया कि हम ठीक है, हमें बना लो, हमारे बस की और कुछ है नहीं. ऑलराइट, तो उनका इम्पैक्ट बहुत कम था. इनफैक्ट इथियोपिया ने उनको हरा दिया था, Alright, so probably one of the only European power which was defeated by African power, that was Italy. So वो impact question आ सकता है, the manner in which they got unified and the overall impact. ठीक है, देख रहे एक बार. ठीक है, that's it for today. Tomorrow we'll have class on app only. Okay, off कर दो.
मेंशनिंग, सो जैसे क्वेश्चन आ रहा है